Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to Football Inc. I hope you're all happy and healthy, doing the things you love. I hope you've just come in from Instagram, from Twitter, or from Spurs Talk Show, and hopefully some other people were just hanging around waiting for the show. Apologies, it was supposed to be 8:30 and they got put back to 8:45, but these things happen. Guys, smash the granny out of the like button as you come in. Take your shoes off. Do the duties that you should do for every channel because it costs nothing to do. Smash the subscribe whilst you're there. I'm here with Johnny H, of course. Monster Man from Instagram and from Twitter fame. How are you, Johnny? Massive things to talk about tonight, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, listen, it's been an interesting day. I thought it was going to be a quiet day today. I didn't expect any sort of major stories, but there's one that's always in our favourites: finance, circumventing rules. And as soon as that one landed this morning, you and I were straight on messaging
Wild,
each other.
mate.
You know,
wild.
Yeah. So it's fun and games. It's fun and games. And listening to a couple of things about Thomas Tuchel saying that Henderson is a crucial member of the England squad, and he's really the guy who lifts these players. Well, I'm not sure what happened at Andorra and Senegal. We got the arse smashed out of us. So I'm not sure quite what Thomas Tuchel is talking about. Maybe he's been sent by Germany to destroy England for the next 5 years. Who knows? But there's lots to talk about. Lots to talk about. Grealish left out of the Man City World Cup squad. Is that a sign? Tutty bye?
I think so, mate. I think he's left out. So he left out of the England squad or left out of the Club World Cup squad?
He's left out the Manchester City squad for the World Cup. For the World Club Cup, should I say. Hi there, Steve, and hi to everybody in the room. As Sean says, hit the like button. If you're news, hit the subscribe button, please. We're trying to grow the channel, and hit those comments. Let us know where you're from. So, Sean, shall we kick off with the Arsenal news? Arsenal are in a bit of a panic. Yeah, there they were, diving in for Sesko and going all in, and then suddenly, I don't know, it's all suddenly about turn.
Well, it looks to me, mate, like they are. They're Johnny squeaky squeak. I feel like they maybe have got. I don't know what to make of this, right? But they pivoted back into the Gyokeres deal. They're trying to gazump, trying to screw up Man United's deal for Gyokeres. But Gyokeres' best mate has said he's going to Manchester United.
Yeah.
So let's assume for a second that that's done. Or like Arsenal are going, well, let's just see if we can. No, I didn't want that girl. I wanted you, baby. I always wanted you. Right? The analogy back.
You were the one.
I was just giving her a lighter. I was just commenting. I've always loved you, baby. Yeah. But like, what are we doing here? Why? You have to ask the question, why? Is it because there's news out of the Sesko camp that either the club don't want to accept the deal, right? Yeah. Even for what it's worth, even Sporting apparently are dismissing the gentleman's agreement for Gyokeres, and that United are going, that's fine. So if you're raising the price, we're still going to pay it because we really want him. He wants to go there. If Arsenal weren't interested in Gyokeres because they didn't see the need or the value or the right price point, now their club is doing it. We're asking for this, like Sporting and Portuguese clubs always do. But why would you be suddenly worried about the Sesko deal? What's going on, Johnny? What's going on?
You know what? Who was the first person? Who was the first club to mention this summer we're spending big? Arsenal. Who was the first club to say we need a striker? The fans knew they needed a striker. The whole football community knew they needed a striker. So you would think first team to make a move in this window would not be Man United, would not be Liverpool or Manchester City. It would be Arsenal. Yet here we are. The 2 weeks have gone. Arsenal have been flirting over here, flirting over there. Are they going to get caught with nothing? Are they going to caught with nothing and have to go for their third and fourth choice? Because if Sesko doesn't go, I mean, listen, Sesko could have gone to Saudi, but they didn't. And, they've gone to, they're now flirting with, I mean, have Man United paused now because of Bruno Fernandes not going for the 100 million? Is that what slowed them down? And now Arsenal have seen as an opportunity because there's a clause in proceedings because United thought he's going to go. He's been offered all the gold he can eat.
And
And
he said no.
At 100 million, and he said no.
Do you know what, Johnny? I think the ability to speculate here, even if 99% of the speculation is miles off the target, right? Miles off. We're carpet bombing, hoping that one of them lands on the target. Either way, I think that the thought experiment here demonstrates probably some level of like insight into the amount of shenanigans and the amount of moving pieces that it takes to get a deal over the line for a player that is wanted by everybody, that are of the caliber of teams that have access to everything, and that money somewhat appears to be of no relevance when you can do what these clubs are doing off the books and all this crap we'll talk about later. And you know, on this channel, we've been guilty of using a lot of analogies, Johnny, right? Like that we use the Uber story to talk about, going to the party. I've said patience is a virtue versus the early bird catches the worm. Two very common phrases in life that mean the entire opposite. There's another phrase maybe that could be applied here to Arsenal. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. And I feel like maybe Arsenal are a little bit sloppy in as much as they can't make their mind up on what girl to take home. And at the end, they're going to go home with a kebab.
Well, exactly. There's two girls. They're flirting with both. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go to the toilet and think about it. And by the time they've gone back, they come back onto the dance floor. Both have gone. And all they're left with is the one with a gammy leg, right? So I'm not sure what Arsenal are going to be left with. Listen, there's lots of choice. There's Victor Osimhen. Okay, there's Ekitete, right? There's Ollie Watkins. There's so much. There's so much. You just aged Luke.
Yeah.
I just caught the end, so don't worry, guys. Arsenal going home for an angry way. Yeah.
A danger wank, yeah.
I mean, if you were an Arsenal fan right now, would you not be going, what the hell is going on? Man City made 3 signings. Liverpool have made 2 signings. Man United, losers of the Europa League final, have gone and signed Matheus Cunha. Even Brighton have made signings. So why is it that Arsenal, who have spoken about the striker for the last 2 years, who Mikel Arteta said we're spending big, massive this summer. We're going to massive charge. All they've signed is potentially Zubimendi, right?
But still not done.
He's still not done, even though Fabrizio's sort of done a here we go-ish. We go-ish with Real Madrid trying to poke their nose in.
And Johnny, I don't know if you've seen the other news that Plettigol, who's, someone that you pay attention to when it comes to German transfer links, who was the winger that we spoke about on yesterday and the day before show that Arsenal are probably going to prioritise for the left wing spot?
Nico.
Guess where he's going to be going?
Real?
Bayern Munich.
Oh, Bayern Munich.
Because Plettigol is saying that Nico Williams is very open to a move to Bayern. The Spanish forward is asking for £20 million a year salary, 20 million euros. His release clause is 60 million euros. 20 million, that's 400,000 euros a week in salary.
Listen, the old
man's worth that, by the way.
No, he's not. He's not. He stops and starts. I've got to tell you, he stretches the play and everything. But listen, with these signings, until they're holding up the shirt, and Spurs fans should know very well that there was a player who came to Spurs called William, who was there ready to sign. He said, please, can I go to the toilet? I'll only be a minute. Hopped out the window, jumped in a car, and just up the road, he was signing for Chelsea. Arsenal could use Nkunku. Yeah, they could. And Chelsea would definitely be trying to get rid of it. If you look at the World Club Cup, how many strikers Chelsea are taking with them, just strikers. They've got Delap, Nkunku, Nicholas Jackson. I'm trying to think of the other ones, but there's about... They had about five different strikers that they listed, but I I don't know. I think Nkunku.
Can you imagine, mate, if Arsenal end up paying? And by the way, Chelsea have got pedigree of getting their money back on flops, right? They did it to Arsenal last summer for Kai Havertz. How much did they pay for Kai Havertz? 78, 80 million, and then paid the geezer 300 grand a week, right?
Yeah.
And he's all right, but he's not that. He's not best in the world kind of level.
No.
Imagine if they end up after all of this. Imagine if they end up with Nkunku.
I honestly think that it's mighty strange that they haven't done the deal yet. Yeah, so the forwards for Chelsea are Pedro Neto, Liam Delap, Cole Palmer, Noni Madueke, Nicholas Jackson, Christopher Nkunku, Tyreek George, and Mark Guéhi. So they're not sure.
I don't know who the last guy is. Who's Mark Guéhi? I've not heard of him before.
Well, he's probably another one. Don't forget they got the number 2 Brazilian.
Yeah.
I mean, this year, who's number 2 behind Endrick. Don't worry about Chelsea. They're buying up anyone who's got 2 legs and can run fast.
And they're very good at doing it, mate, because they have a. I was saying this in the last show with here he is, Lukey, Spotlight on Spurs. Great debut by the way, mate. Absolutely sensational. Good to see you. Let's pivot for a second. We'll come back to transfers, mate. This story about Manchester United, right? The way that Kieran Maguire said it,
it's disgusting, mate.
It was like it was a footnote. It was like, oh, there's 3 reasons why Man United can spend the money they're spending. One, it's Manchester United. This is Manchester United. Like, they're a brilliant brand. They get great deals. They make more money than yada yada. I was like, yeah, but all of that's known and reflected in the accounts that show horrendous losses, right? So that's just like what I don't know what you're doing there. Cross that one off. 2,
it's 123 million. Right. So just for clarity here, in the American company registered in the American Stock Exchange, they showed £123 million loss. Yeah,
I think it was 153 million pound loss, and it was 53 on the UK account, so 100 million pound swing.
Yeah, no, I think it was pounds. Anyway, go on, carry on, and then.
Well, yeah. So it's just the way that he said that there's 3 reasons why, right? There's 3 reasons because it was like, how can Man United spend this money on Cunha and Mbeumo and also have the money for Gyokeres when they've basically had a shit year, 7th, 16th, and then no Europe, all that stuff. There's 3 reasons. One is they're Manchester United. They attract massive sponsors. Okay, we all know that, right? But that doesn't negate the fact they've had a terrible season. Two, they probably don't envision that next year is going to be as bad as this year. Well, you'd hope not, Kieran. You'd hope not, because they couldn't get much worse. They didn't do anything. Because worse than this year, they're going into the Championship, so that doesn't really count. Oh, and 3, side note. Everyone's focusing on the losses on Manchester United PLC, which happens to be listed and accounted for in the American accounts. But for PSR purposes, it has to be a UK company, so they run it through Red Devils Limited, right? Which or whatever it's called, which is which shows £100 million loss, and I'm like, that's free? That's the side note? What the fuck are we talking about here? That is massive. How can you do that? Are you literally just saying, well, the ones in America, there's 100 million quid that we don't have to allocate onto UK books. And if so, what is that £100 million deficit?
Yeah, so let me just correct you here. Sorry. He said, I think the third main issue is all of the focus has been on Manchester United PLC's accounts, which are registered in New York. There, we saw a loss of £131 million last year. But this is not the company which is used for PSR purposes, because you've got to be based in the UK. It looks as if Manchester United have been using another company called Red Football. The losses were only 36 million.
Right. Okay, there you go. Yeah.
So therefore, they've £100 million better off for PSR purposes on the back of that. And hang on a minute. Yet in January, when Cutthroat Ratcliffe said they're in real danger of going out of business, going bust or whatever, they're in terrible trouble, got to make massive, and they're in very dangerous risk of going over FFP and PSR. Yet less than 6 months later, we've got this. How has no one else seen? Why has it taken to now to find out the company. Oh, we got a company over there which is running up massive losses, 131 million. But don't worry, we've got the company in the UK which we won't put all the losses through, and it's only 31 million. Therefore, we're 100 million pound better off. It's circumventing the rules. Plain and simple.
Look, I mean, for what it's worth, the PSR or the FFP rules for Premier League clubs are different to UEFA, right? So when it comes to Chelsea, for example, like their losses on like that they can hide behind hotel transfers, sales and loan backs and all that, or sales and all that shit. That is allowable in the Premier League rules. It's not allowable. It doesn't count in the UEFA rules, right? So Manchester United are probably a beneficiary of the fact that they can spend more money this year because they're outside of Europe than they could have done if they were in Europe. Because I don't know any of the specifics, but there's likely going to be some of that 100 million. I've got no idea. It's just like I've been busy all day. I'm now look into the story. I don't even know if the details are out there, but the maybe some of that 100 million difference is reflected in things that would be more alarming and more of a problem, more problematic if they happen to be in Europe, where they have to adhere to the 70%, the squad cost ratios and all that stuff that don't, where the revenue part, the numerator, sorry, the denominator of that number is not necessarily the same when it comes to things like hotel sales, or I'm not even sure if they even engage in those sorts of things. But Chelsea, for example, are still might have problems with the UEFA rule, but don't have it for the Premier League.
Not for the Premier League. So could Chelsea go and register on the US stock market and set up another company in the UK, carry all the losses in the American company, and have a different one for the UK where they only funnel off the losses that are suitable to meet the PSR and FFP numbers? Well,
I mean, yeah, if they were to go to a stock market listed entity, but like that takes forever. That's not a quick thing, and they're obviously not. They're obviously owned by Blueco and those things. So I don't think that's going to be happening. But I'm not. I don't know. To be entirely honest, that this story's too new, and I haven't had the chance to look into it. I don't know whether or not you can just transition the ownership into a different jurisdiction. Like, but the reason why Man United can do that is because they are listed on the United States.
I understand that, but loss for the company is a loss for the company, and you know they are a football club. They're not like an entertainment complex like Spurs with 101 different revenue streams. What I'd like to know is who's lying, because we saw that Ratcliffe came in and declared that there was financial issues. Did we also not see that he had to put in another £200 million of his own money?
Yeah,
to balance the books, right? So,
who's talking about?
Ratcliffe.
Did he? I didn't know that, actually.
Well, yeah. So what I'm trying to work out here is, did he not declare in January that the club is in trouble and he has?
Yeah, he said in December.
450 staff members cut, wages cut. Alex Ferguson kicked out. Right, all bonuses stopped for Christmas. Canteen closed down for staff. Right, whole manner of raft of changes, and now we're to believe that this club, no more than 6 months later, is capable of buying Cunha, Gyokeres, and Brian Mbeumo without a problem.
Well, they're going to have to sell, aren't they?
Yeah, who's going to buy Rashford? 350 grand a week. Casemiro at 300 grand a week with 1 year left on his contract. Yeah. Jadon Sancho on 300 grand a week. You can carry on. Højlund's not going anywhere on his wages. 75.
And it's not like even if you were to loan them and cut and someone else was to pay 65-70% of the salary, it's not like they're replacing them with 20 million pound players that are kids that are on 40 grand a week to make up the difference. If Gyokeres is going to go to them, I mean, Mbeumo's already said he wants. Was he getting 220 or something?
200 grand. Gyokeres isn't going to go for less than 250 grand a week. If you're his agent and you know that Rashford's on 300 grand a week, Casemiro's on 300 grand a week, you're not going to go in for your client if you really want the player and say, okay, we'll go in at 200 grand, are you? You're going to do your best job. You want parity, or as near as parity as possible. And I think there's more news in this story, because you've got Anthony as well. Look at his wages, how much he's on, and that's before you look at the goalkeeper or any of the other defenders that they've bought. Delict, they only signed him last year, so massive wages. And what is their income? Where's their income come? They've got no Europe, and they finished in, what was it, 15th place? Was it 15th?
Yeah. Johnny, just quickly look at the private chat for me, mate. Do me a favor, if you can click on the private chat, and just say yes or no, and we're good. Go to the comment section, and then in the sidebar where it says comments, click on comments, and there should be a little tab that says private chat.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, maybe for this topic.
Okay, yeah, cool.
This topic, yeah.
Hang on, mate. Let me just. There you go. Cool. We're going to bring on a gentleman who made his debut on the show, because I'm not familiar with this story in any depth at all, and also this is slightly just a very unique situation. We're going to bring on a guy who was on the chat, who came into the Spurs talk show last week, I think it was. He made his debut. Who's a Twitter guy. His name's Levynomics. He's an accountant, a good guy. Connor, his name is, and he's obviously going to be able to shed a little bit more light on this particular story, because I do think this is meaningful, and it's something we should get to know. And I haven't had any time to look into it properly. But whilst we're waiting for him, mate, then we'll pivot back to a couple more transfer stories. There are a couple sort of big ones out there, mate. Obviously, the transfer window Transfer window closed last night for the first round. But Manchester United are considering proposing a swap deal with Napoli for Victor Osimhen. This is 8 minutes old, this story, which would take Joshua Zirkzee to Naples. So another sort of story that's percolating around the striker market, mate, that maybe Arsenal think they can get in on Gyokeres. Maybe now Man United are pivoting to Osimhen. What are we doing here? What are we doing?
Well, they don't have to pay for him, maybe. Zirkzee will come in. And how you doing, Connor? We'll come back to that story. So, Connor, good to see you.
Good to see you, mate.
Nice to see you. Hey.
So let us know what's going on with this Man United thing, mate, because to me it looks like it's shenanigans. They are afoot, but I haven't had a chance to look into it properly. So let us know what your take is on it, buddy.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a storm in a teacup, to be honest. I think it's so what Kieran Maguire said is right in terms of the fact that for the PSR purposes, they're using the UK sub, because you have to use a UK registered company for PSR purposes, and then obviously you've got the US parent of Man United, the PLC, that has much bigger losses. But actually, when you run the calculations through, given what you can allow and disallow for PSR purposes, so things like the 40 million that went in costs of the share transaction relating to Jim Ratcliffe coming in, which you could disallow from the parent, which are not in the UK accounts. Once you start running all of those differences through, you actually only get to about £10 million of difference between the UK subsidiary and the US parent, rather than the 100 million loss that's being reported. So I think it's it's one of those that's a bit of a, as I say, a bit of a storm in a teacup.
So it's just allowable losses, basically. And everyone was looking at the top number and thinking, is that just the same as like infrastructure spend then, right? So if you built a stadium or you bought a hotel or whatever else, then on your overall losses, it would look meaningful.
Exactly.
But
and then if you look at, if you look at the UK subsidiaries accounts, that gets some interest income from the rest of the group. So it makes their loss in the accounts look smaller than it actually is. But that would be disallowed the other way for PSR purposes. So once you work all of those through, you get to about 10 million of difference. So there is a small difference, but it's nowhere near the sort of reported 100 million.
They reported at the end of June 2024, £113 million loss. And, we heard Ratcliffe in January saying, we must make drastic costs. We are a sinking ship, more or less. Dramatic, very dramatic. Even kicking out Alex Ferguson from his paid job. I believe there's no smoke without fire. Do you really make comments like that? I can't believe that, you know, finishing 15th hasn't hurt their when they projected, you know, Connor, they would have projected worst case scenario at the beginning of the season, and worst case scenario did not include finishing 15th and did not include not being in Europe. So they're way out their budget range. They're still laboured with all of those players on ridiculous wages who they can't get rid of. And yet and in January, he's saying how he needs to make these drastic cuts. And yet we're still seeing them bringing in players on huge wages. It doesn't seem to, but there's something not quite right here, or how they're managing to juggle all these numbers.
Yeah, I think that there's a few points. I mean, I'm not all over United's numbers as much as I am Spurs's, obviously, but I am, I've done a fair amount, because it's probably the only ownership model that I can criticise more than Enoch, to be honest with you. But I think there's a couple of points. I think one, that they definitely did have cash flow issues. I mean, I think Jonny, you mentioned it just before I joined. Ratcliffe had to put in about 200 million of cash himself, right? So they had big cash flow issues. Some of the measures that Ratcliffe has taken that have obviously been really heavily criticised around, cutting staff, etc., actually are starting to bear fruit, though. So if you looked at being a listed company, they have to do quarterly earnings, which is not what happens with the other football clubs. So we did get to see their latest quarterly results, and actually things are starting to turn the tide. Their wages are way down. Their revenue guidance actually increased compared to what they thought they were going to get. That would probably be, an increase in some of the commercial stuff. So actually, some of the stuff that Ratcliffe has done has started to be successful. So I think you're right in terms of the points you make on the budget around, obviously, where they would have expected to finish in the league and perhaps getting European football again. But actually, on some of this other stuff, they've been more successful. I think, Sean, you made the point around needing to sell. So in terms of PSL, I think they're pretty close to the limit. Obviously, UEFA squad cost control stuff won't be relevant for them because they're not in Europe next year. But on the PSL stuff, they're pretty close, regardless of whether you look at the parent company or the UK sub, as I said. But I think what they're banking on, to be honest, is some of these savings coming through that they've already seen, and then selling the likes of Rashford, who's going to be a pure PSR profit. Selling the likes of Garnacho to help fund these moves that they're obviously making for Kuna and perhaps Mbeumo.
So do you think that there's a temptation then, like even if Jonny and I always talk about like who's going to buy Rashford for whatever he's really worth, if they're going to have to take on all the players not under any sort of duress in that he has to leave if the buying club isn't willing to pay him what he's earning, he's on a long contract, getting good money. He doesn't need to leave. Maybe he will for the betterment of his career, maybe another loan or whatever. But because of it's a pure profit PSR play, is there any sort of short-term pain, long-term gain thing here for United, whereby they would essentially lower the asking price so that the buying club would be able to then put the actual value of the player into the wages to cover the wages, so that Rashford's more likely to be okay leaving, and therefore whatever money they could get on the trade could then help them out in the PSR thing, and then through the amortization process, you can essentially 5x the value in the short term.
I think they almost definitely will do that, Sean, to be honest. I think it's really not in United's interest to loan him out again, because they've still got him then sitting on their... Right. Well, they've got the opportunity cost of not being able to recognise the 5 times profit, as you say. So I think he'll be going for, around 30 million. I'd guess that they would be happy to accept for him, because that creates, 150 for them. So
I just wonder whether or not, although the 30 million creates 150 for them on the books, I just wonder how many clubs could afford to pay 30 million and then the 350 grand a week wages. And, with the way Manchester United have been with Rashford, maybe there'll be no rush for Rashford to do anything that would help Man United out. It seems that the mood between them is not very cordial. So
being spiteful, yeah.
Spiteful, yeah. And I think, his agents would definitely been saying, look, Man United want you to go. What are you going to pay me? You know, what's in it for me? Because you know, even if Man United accept 20 million, right, and give him some to get him off, or you know, it's look. Man United, it's not just this, you know, they've got Anthony on 300 grand a week. They've got Casemiro 1 year left on his contract, 300 grand a week. There's so many players. Look how many players they've got there. It's just incredible that wage bill is not pushing their PSR. I mean, I'd like to know what percentage of income is on wages right now, because it must be
I've got
quite
it somewhere. For United, I'll dig that out just whilst I'm
It's
talking.
nowhere
But I
near as
think,
high
you
as
know,
like Aston Villa, though, is
Oh,
it?
it's not a nice. It's not a nice.
72%, something like that. It's close to that threshold.
It must be in the 70s, though. Must be. It must be high 70s, even though.
yeah, the thing is that United are such a revenue-making machine as well.
Yeah.
It's you know, I think
Yeah.
that helps them. But yeah, I mean, look, on the point on Rashford, I think you're right. I think it's a bit of an issue for every club who's looking to sell players at the moment. In the overseas clubs, obviously, are not particularly well off.
You're correct.
And so who realistically could afford Rashford's wages? You know,
25%.
he's not going to move to one of the other big six, you wouldn't think. So, you know, there
Yeah,
was
it might
chat
go
about
to
Barcelona, but Barcelona seem doubtful now. So I think he's a difficult player to move, even if they cut the transfer fee.
Barcelona's the well, I mean, that's just another whole fucking like tale of I mean, you could spend a month trying to chew through the various shenanigans that happen in Barcelona.
Is there anything left for them to sell, Connor? I mean, listen, they've sold their majority of their future TV revenues, TV stations. They've sold seats for a stadium that's not even built. You know, I mean, it's laughable. And then we saw the other day the goalkeeper Stegers. He's owed
Ter Stegen,
Ter Stegen, where he's owed, you know, for the remainder of his contract, 42 million euros, and they're asking him, will he take 10? I know what I'd be saying.
Yeah. That's a whole story. No one I haven't looked into properly, but there's something weird about that one. It doesn't make any sense to me. Connor, whilst we've got you, mate, I hope the chat. I'm sure the chat is mainly Tottenham. So let's. I do want to just ask you about. You know, I know you're obviously. I gather from your posts and things that you lean into the Levy out sort of narrative. With regards Tottenham's summer, where's the sort of, in your opinion, where's the truth with regards the Matt Law rumours that were, you know, Tottenham are essentially cash poor, profit rich or whatever, but it's a sell before you can buy thing. I initially took that as that's a club push narrative into their kind of feeder hands to get the club or get the fans prepared for a dry summer on the proviso or the understanding that we probably weren't going to win the Europa League. Winning the Europa League changed that a little bit. And then Simon Jordan, you know, who I think me and him speak a lot from the same hymn sheet a little bit. But then he's bringing out things that I guess we don't have access to the insights on, or at least I don't think we do in the accounts. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like the specifics of the covenants in the loan deals around what those conditions might mean with regards, like if you drop below certain liquidity, if you drop below certain cash, you know, cash equivalents, then that means that you can't do anything above a certain threshold and spend in order to protect the lender. You know, I don't really know at the moment. I feel like I'm a little bit behind the eight ball. I haven't spent enough time kind of looking into it. What's your take on where Tottenham's summer financial situation is in reality?
Can I just add, sorry, Connor, can I just add to that also? You know, a few weeks ago, Sean and I were looking at all the different subsidiary companies as well, and the money that's tucked away in various
300 according to that report, £330 million is in cash in certain accounts, right?
Yeah, see, just quickly on that one, I think that's wrong, by the way. And I think that website, MCO Insights or something, isn't it? There were, I think what they've done some double counting, so they've double counted the consolidated accounts plus the subsidiary accounts, which obviously the subsidiary accounts were already captured in the consolidated.
Okay.
So I think that's wrong. I think so. So the cash reserves at the end of last year sit at 79 million for Spurs,
Okay.
which is low for Spurs but higher for football clubs. So Spurs have typically managed a very high cash balance because, you know, if you look at the way that ENIC run Tottenham, it's this self-sustaining model generally with very, very little equity injection or shareholder involvement from them. And obviously the sort of modus operandi has been that we will support the operations of the football club through what the football club makes. And one could argue they even support more than that because it, you know, there's a huge amount of property investment and those types of things happening as well. So that's certainly been the way that Spurs have operated from a cash perspective. So I think where Matt Law's article is probably getting at, and I'll try and address all the points, but Matt Law's one I think is probably getting at, I think there's a bit of sell to buy stuff around, you know, managing squad places, to be honest, which is non-financial. On the financial bit, look, from a PSR and UEFA squad cost control perspective, and we'll probably cover this in more detail at some point, Sean, but
Yeah.
broadly, we are fine and we're in a really super healthy position, Spurs, and that is so far away from being an issue. We would never breach those rules with the way that we currently operate. So that's fine. Cash is lower, and obviously we've got to, you know, although we've got 79 million, which is the highest of any Premier League club in terms of what's in our cash reserves. Liverpool are 8 million, for example. So football clubs typically do not hold a lot of cash, but that being said, if we are going to continue with this self-sustaining model, cash does start to become a little bit tight. And I suspect that that's probably what some of these journalists are alluding to when they talk about our issues. Now, obviously, what other clubs do in that situation, and Arsenal have done it, and over the last few years, so since we moved into the stadium, the Kroenkes have put 334 million of cash into Arsenal to ensure that they could compete again. So after Arteta's first season, the finishing eighth.
With some of those loans, sorry, Connor, was some that a lot of that was loans, which
completely shareholder loans.
Yeah, which UEFA and the Prem were looking into whether or not that in itself breached regulations, right?
Yeah, so that the Prem were looking into it directly in a response to Man City making the point, to be honest, because Man City were making the point in their own defence of obviously the charges they've had.
Third party,
even Liverpool's
transactions or whatever, right?
Oh, gosh, sure.
Sorry, it was like that. Yeah, Man City won the court case for third party transactions, which essentially like walked everything back, and now that whole thing's up in the air. And ever since then, there hasn't been a single movement. In fact, there's been a regression on any tightening of any loopholes on all those things because they don't know what that means, and also whether or not that therefore that now if they were saying, well, if we can't do exaggerated loan values, exaggerated third party transaction values, then we shouldn't be able to. If we can't do that, then how can directors put in essentially low interest rate or zero interest rate loans?
Exactly.
And then hoping that either way, the outcome was going to be that Arsenal have to charge relative interest rates on their loans, or that they were going to get theirs unwound. And it turned out that they got theirs unwound, or going to get theirs unwound. So that therefore the cash free the interest free direct the loan thing is also going to be another null and void conversation in the future, right?
Yeah, because what else you're going to have here, I would presume that the Fenway Group will be making loans available to Liverpool for the current transfers, right?
Well, they did last year. They put in 127 million into Liverpool last year, and even after that, Liverpool are only at an £8 million cash balance. So I suppose the point I'm making is football clubs don't make money, right? Owners of football clubs are in the business of owning football clubs because they're going to make a return on their investment at the very end when they look to sell. They don't typically make money on a sort of annual basis, and actually the opposite in terms of owners have to typically put in huge amounts of cash to ensure that they could compete, and obviously that hasn't been ENIC's model. So I think, look, for us, I think it's all about appetite and whether we want to spend, which it typically always has been. And I think, you know, there's a few things that we could do. Obviously, ENIC could put in and to be fair, they did put in 35 million in January, so they're not captured in the latest numbers, but they did do a equity injection in January of 35 million. They could look to do that again to get the cash position healthier. We've also got this 50 million pound revolving facility with HSBC that could be used in the short term. And obviously, with most transfers, you're not paying the cash up front. You're gonna do that over a number of years. So that's a very long-winded way, Sean, of saying I think we're okay, but we're not as okay from a cash perspective as we have been in previous years. But if you had owners with ambition, we're in a really healthy position.
But if you're amortizing these purchases, what a lot of fans seem to think that, when you do a 50 million pound purchase, that there's suddenly 50 million pounds gone out. It's spread over the period. So with that being amortized, they shouldn't really have a problem buying 2 or 3 players around the 50 million part, Matt.
But the problem is, though, mate, is that I think, like, to simplify the argument for people that aren't into finance and that don't want the complexity of having to figure out what amortizations and things are. Like, even though you are amortizing, unless you go and buy an Eze and you have to trigger the clause and do it all up front or whatever. Like, even though, yes, you are amortizing current or future transfers over 5 years, you're still paying off the previous acquisitions today.
Yeah, old ones.
And so you end up kind of going, well, what's the transfer budget this year? It's 100 million quid, for argument's sake. And then people go, well, if that means that we can spend 500 million quid, right? Because you can amortize that over 5 years. Well, no, because you're still paying off 80 million quid a year from the previous 4 years or whatever else. So, and then you get into the specifics of, well, how much is due this year on relative to the average on previous transfers. And if I'm not mistaken, Connor,
we're over 200, aren't we? 217.
It's quite a lot, isn't it? And isn't the line or like a disproportionately higher amount of the amortized spend of previous transfers due in the short term than it has been in previous years? Is that right?
Yeah, it is, because for all of the criticisms I have, and a number of them are wage spend related, to be honest, rather than transfer spend. We have actually spent money on transfers since we moved into the new stadium.
Yeah.
Now there's an argument to say how much we've spent comparative to our main comparators, i.e. the rest of the big 6, but there's no doubt that the spending has ramped up since we moved into the new stadium. I mean, net spend in the 5 years before we moved into the new stadium was only about 13 million pounds a year, right?
Yeah.
So that
now
that's
over 100 million pound a year now, right?
Yeah, so that's ramped up quite significantly, and to your point, Sean, means that you've obviously got to find those cash amounts. I mean, there is a bit of a nuance with cash versus amortization as well, in terms of, so you can amortize the transfer fee over the length of the contract for the purposes of accounting, but sometimes there will be specific deals, and you gave an example, Eze, where if we triggered a release clause, we will have to pay either the whole amount or the vast majority of that 68 million pound in cash straight away. And actually, even for some other signings, depending on the exact terms, it might be, Solanke's we might have agreed with Bournemouth that we're going to pay 30 million in year 1, 30 million in year 2 from a cash perspective, but then you amortize the accounting over 5 years. So there's a couple of different sort of moving parts. The other point you raised on covenants, which I think is the Simon Jordan point.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. We're not privy to any of that. So who knows? And it wouldn't be out of the realms of imagination to say that there would be some sort of covenant around maintaining some sort of cash balance or having some liquidity. I think.
Do you think Simon Jordan knows? Do you think Jordan's been told by Levy, do me a favor and keep mentioning this because I'm getting some heat and people don't know this, or is he just sort of dangling the carrot, hoping that there's a little bit of bite?
My person, I had a bit of a debate on this on X with someone else who was saying that there might be covenants around wage spend.
Really,
I think if there were, I think there certainly isn't for wage spend personally, because I think, look, Man United are in huge amounts of debt and have very similar sort of loans, etc., and that they're able to pay high wages. The fact that Tottenham have never actually paid any of the capital off the external debt that we've used to finance the stadium, and we're only servicing the interest, sort of contradicts this point of saving on wages, because you'd think they then use that to pay off some of the capital. So look, I think it's unlikely, on the basis that I think if there was something, why not say it in the accounts or in the statements? You know, because Levy could immediately shut down some of the arguments that us as me and Jonny as Levy out fans make in terms of restrictions on spending or wages. You would just make that point in the accounts, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, I guess so. But I think also Daniel Levy likes to keep his cards as close to his chest as possible. I don't think he likes to give away any information that he doesn't have to, which, I've been making the argument. And Jonny, I want to I'm going to finish this point, and then I want to ask you, Jonny, a question about not specifically necessarily Eze, but your relationship, the fact that you know a thing or two with regards to agents and whether or not they may or may not be able to influence certain things. I want to ask you a question on that in a second, but just with regards Daniel Levy, I've sort of been making this. It's a loose argument, super loose. Like it's more of like a hypothesis, like a thought experiment. But obviously, we know that they're looking for investment. We don't know who, what, when, where, at what price point, what it looks like, and whether Daniel Levy will be around, to benefit from it. What the whole thing that's going on with Charrington,
Charrington and Vinny is a big change. It's a big change.
Yeah, for sure, 100%, right? But in terms of like we've been looking for investment for a couple of years, and I know these things take time, but like one of the arguments would be, well, the reason why there's a delay is that this guy values the club at a level. Same with like things like naming rights. He values the naming rights at a certain level that there hasn't been a buyer for a bite. There's no one's been biting, and so if you think that the club is valued at a certain price point and you can't understand why no one else wants to get on board it, is there not an argument to raise money by going back to publicly listed ownership and going back to the market? Because the market dictates the value of everything. And Daniel Levy can immediately get his payoff. Joe Lewis can immediately get their payoff by kind of relisting some of the shares, a percentage of them, into the market, and then figuring out what the market determines the value to be. Because that £100 million, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, Connor, but that £100 million, the dilution percentages that they had to sort of take or put onto the minority shareholders, if I'm not mistaken, the valuation of those shares that were listed in order to get that £100 million taken valued the company closer to like £6 or £7 billion at the dilutionary value, in terms of how much of a dilutionary percentage was affected on the for the £100 million entry point. And so I know that there's shenanigans and why people raise money at certain valuations, because it obviously traditionally for fledgling companies in tech space, for example, the last value is the minimum that you'll pay for the next valuation, all those sorts of things. But like, rather than sort of diluting yourself at an overinflated value to put in 100 million here, I don't know what the valuation was on the 30 million or 35 million that they raised in January. But like, isn't there some notion that if you really believe that the market is valued, and if there isn't the buyers, and we don't know with regards to Qatar or whoever else, the latest rumors, Petronas and Malaysia, but isn't there some logic to saying like, let the market determine the value and sort of put it back? I know there's obviously consequences around, like you then have to kind of give up more control, and then you have to give more access to information that you don't want to give, like you said about Man United doing quarterly reports, yada yada yada. But like there's some merit that if money's that strict, that tight, and you really want to get out, Lewis really wants to get out, but no one wants to pay your valuation, then let's test your valuation against the market, because the market always knows.
But that's why Charrington's there now, to oversee, to make sure that this doesn't happen, and he puts a realistic price on it. And the second of all, the fact that there's only £79 million, well, it seems like there's a lot of money, £79 billion in cash at Tottenham right now. That's nowhere near enough to build the hotel, do the capital intensive projects like the extension of the medical facility at Hotspur Way, or the massive development at Whitewebs. These are massive capital intensive projects, which is why they put these guys on the board, to have credibility for those board, because they got great financial background. Charrington, the ex-Citibank, and Vinny with his private equity connections. They must get inward investment to follow these projects through, and that might lead, Connor, to a bigger stake, more than just giving them capital money for the capital project, but to actually make a stake in the club. Just after you finished, Sean, there's a super chat there from Man U play. Go on.
I'll let Connor come back quickly on the topics we're just asking, and then we'll get to the super chat, and then I want to ask you, Jonny, about the question I had about agents thing.
Yeah, I think on the point around valuation, I mean my own personal view, given what and it's based somewhat on what we saw with both Chelsea and United. I think, to be honest, if Tottenham was serious about selling or having investment in, it could happen tomorrow, right? I think big six clubs don't come up often for sale or investment, and so I think what it is just around the sort of debate of how much and what do they want to do. Is it a full takeover or is it a minority investment? I mean, if I was Enoch, there's one part of me that says getting out now is not a bad thing for them. That we've now won a trophy. There's a lot of heat still on Levy and Enoch. Why wouldn't you just sail off into the sunset with your 3.5 billion or whatever the valuation is going to be? But the other part of me thinks, well, a minority investment might be the best thing for all parties, right? So Levy gets to keep his job. Perhaps it's not on the footballing side so much, but he continues to be involved. They get to realise some cash, which is the only thing really prohibiting us from
moving up,
capital intensive product and spending. And it's a bit like, I had made this point the other day to someone about United. Jim Ratcliffe has acted as the perfect shield for the Glazers, right? No one really talks about the Glazers anymore. They talk about the decisions that Jim Ratcliffe is making around, cutting jobs or whatever else. But actually, if you look at what the Glazers have done to United, they've been absolute parasites. They've taken, near enough 1.2 billion out of the club through interest and dividend payments, but everyone almost forgot about it. The Glazers out, marches stopped. So, I think my personal hope is that there's a takeover imminent. I think there's more noise about investment than there ever has been. And Spurs themselves, in not the account's just gone, the one before, said obviously that they've engaged Rothschild to look for investment. So hopefully it happens. And I do agree with Jonny. I think Peter Charrington coming onto the board, and Sean, I mentioned this last time we spoke, that I know of him and I've dealt with him in my professional career. I think he's come on the board to credentialise it and add credentials, and they've needed that for some time. And Vinay is obviously the second part of that. So I think it all points in the right direction, hopefully, from that perspective. But look, I'm a big critic of Levy, but I do also recognise what he's done in terms of revenue diversification and some of the off the pitch stuff, which I do think does go a little bit unrecognised by some people.
Can I just say, guys, to you, for the other fans who aren't Spurs fans, I'm sorry it sort of drifted into Spurs. It was meant to start with Man United. So I see a few of you in the comments there saying this is meant to be for all fans. Point taken. But it was just, we slid across from there because we started with Manchester United, but it was a natural progression to give some contrast between what's going on at Man United and, what's going on with Spurs as far as finance is concerned. So
at the same time, though, Jonny, we've done shows every day this week, and we spent the majority of time talking about Arsenal. Some shows are going to be more heavily weighted towards some teams than others. So
the super chat there from
from Aslan Romy, thank you very much. Super chat says United's wage to revenue ratio was 51% last financial year. It's now mid 40%. As per the Athletic last week. A lot of poor research here, lads. I think I was talking about the squad cost ratio, right? So not just wages. I was talking about the rest of the makeup as well. So I appreciate the super chat though. Obviously the squad cost includes.
It was actually 55% last year, but anyway.
Poor research, Adrian Romy. Listen, Asian Romy, it's been fluid because if you looked at stuff in January, we would be looking at different numbers. And as Connor said, it's changed on the quarterlies. Yeah, not everyone's checking on the quarterlies, but let's see. Sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the super chat, mate. And El Dante coming in saying Frank Thomas in. That's a joke from last night, sir. Fan cam. Thank you very much, El Dante. I appreciate you, mate. So Jonny, I was going to ask you this question, mate, about, and this isn't about Tottenham specifically, but obviously you're familiar with agent work, right? When it comes to let's say that there's 6 teams rather, that are looking at someone like Eberechi Eze. Does the player, or via through the outlet of the agent, have any influence on whether or not £68 million one lump sum things are reasonable, or that there are abilities to sort of structure it differently? And if so doing, do you need to maybe, if the selling club don't want to let go of the player and will only do so because of the contractual stipulations, is it more beneficial or more likely to occur if the player, if the buying club, the bidding club, was to say, rather than 68 up front, do they have to then maybe go up to like 72, 73 and say, if we give you a little bit more juice, but we can squeeze it over a longer period of time to make because it's unrealistic that anyone, to Connor's point, no one's got £68 million apart from Tottenham in the cash account. So how can anyone do a one lump sum unless they go back into the bank of mum and dad and get a loan at a low interest rate?
Look, it's there's so many permutations and things to bear in mind here. If it's written in stone, if it's in the contract that X will be the release clause and X will be paid over 3, 4, 5 years of the contract, that the largest proportion will be paid off at the front, that's where it will be. It's when it's not written in stone and it's not written into the contract and there's no buyout clause, that's where the negotiations are. And I think if a club, for example, is cash strapped, then you could maybe front load it to give them the money up front now, but less later on. Say, look, we're not willing to pay you that amount of money, but what we are willing to do is pay you a larger sum of money up front to begin with, which is what they need now, rather than jam tomorrow. Basically, I think there's so many things that can affect it. Everyone looks out for themselves. The agent looks out for the agent. He also looks out for his player if he's doing a good job. The selling club obviously want to do what's best for the club, and the buying club is trying to strike the best deal. That's why when people say, well, I can't understand why this deal is taking so long, or why, for example, the Thomas Frank deal is taking forever, it's because the minute detail that goes into it, release clauses, why do you think it is that Ange Postecoglou was sacked on the exact anniversary of the day he signed? There will no doubt be something clause in his contract. If he'd have done it the day before, it probably would cost them more money.
Or the day after, yeah.
Or whatever. The day after, yeah. So there's so many clauses that are often inserted into contracts, into big contracts. Or, for example, if a player re-signs, so like, for example, Mattia Cunha, rather than leave for nothing, he signed a new contract with Wolves. But when he signed that new contract with Wolves, he inserted the buyout clause, and that buyout clause would have also most probably contained terms of payment for the buying club and terms of that were acceptable to Wolves, because they're going to have to use that money. There's no point in them getting, for example, £15 million a year. They probably need to now go and replace. They've got El Nouri's gone, Matthias Cunha's gone. So they've got not far off £100 million, but they need to go and replace those players. So, they will try to get as much of that money up front as they can.
Let me ask this, boys. Connor, I don't know if you're just, I don't know you too well, obviously, mate, but loving getting to know you, mate. And obviously we're going to do a lot more on the Spurs show.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, listen, if you want to hang around, we've only got sort of 10, 15 minutes left. We've got a few stories I want to get to. If you've got takes on football, if you're just, you more just into the finance, or you do a football man as well?
I'm a football man.
All right, well, then we'll keep you around, get your takes on these as well. Just to finish off the kind of transfer news, views and clues from around the game, there is this story about AC Milan. Well, actually, before we get to the AC Milan one, I just want to get back to this story that came out about Gyokeres. Sorry, not Gyokeres. Where is it? Here's a story about Manchester United. We were just talking about this, Johnny, before Connor came on. We just touched on it.
Yeah,
the United are considering proposing. Let me see if I can bring this up on the
it
screen.
was a swap, wasn't it?
Swap deal, yeah, for with Napoli for Osimhen, which would take Xerxes to Naples. Now we know that United are looking to get rid of Højlund,
Yeah.
and they want to get most of their money back. I don't know who in Italy is going to be mad enough to pay most of that money, £70 million for a guy that just hasn't landed yet. And I presumed that Xerxes was going to be, whoever it comes in, Gyokeres or whatever else was going to be the number one, and then Xerxes was going to play second fiddle. Turns out today's story, according to Gazzetta dello Sport, is that Xerxes is now potentially going to move back to Italy.
It's
and Osimhen coming in. So does that mean that, is there truth to the Gyokeres deal that Arsenal are kind of stealing a march, and then United are going to pivot to a maybe cheaper option?
Listen, maybe like what we said, the fact that Fernandes didn't go has thrown a spanner in the works. The £100 million that they thought was going to come in, they probably would have demanded a large proportion of that with the Saudis up front, and that hasn't come in. So they have to look for another deal. The thing is, he's caused a lot of trouble at Napoli. Victor Osimhen, all claims of racism and all sorts, and the fact that he wanted to get out. And at the beginning of the last summer's window, they were talking about fees of over 100 million euros to get him out. Ended up surprisingly going to Galatasaray, which I thought was a bit of a shock. And then we saw the rumours of a £70 million bid from Al Hilal, which he's turned down. I think if you look between the two players, Xerxes and Victor Osimhen, I think they're incomparable, to be quite truthful with you. Not that Xerxes like horrendous, but I think, I think Napoli would be getting the worst of the deal there, unless, again, Naples don't have the money and they're quite happy to do the swap and cut their losses with Victor Osimhen and the trouble that he brings. But I think if you look at the balance between the two, I reckon Osimhen's got to be worth 70 million euros. And Xerxes, what did they pay? 40 million, was it? I'm trying to think off the top of my head.
45, I think. 45, yeah.
45, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have to be, plus cash, really, wouldn't it? I can't see that deal unless, like I said, they can't afford to now do the Gyokeres deal. And this is what they're trying to do. As I said to you before, there were rumours that Man United were looking to try and swap Jadon Sancho back to Borussia Dortmund in exchange for Gittins. But, he wants to go to Chelsea. Chelsea didn't want Jadon Sancho. Can you see what's going on here? Yeah. So.
How about you, Connor? Do you see? How do you see the striker market ended up, mate?
Yeah, I mean, with Osimhen, there's no doubt he's talented, is there? I mean, I think he's outstanding, to be honest. But I think it's an attitude point with him, isn't it? And I think that's probably why the big clubs haven't really sniffed around him as much as they did a couple of years ago, as you say, Johnny, before he went to Galatasaray.
Yeah.
And obviously, as you say, he's turned down that move to Saudi. I think United will benefit massively if that deal does go through, because Xerxes is not in the same stratosphere as Osimhen, I think, as an option up front. I think that with Arsenal, I was pretty certain before today that it was going to be Sesko. But it sounds like reading between the lines that there's talks of Gyokeres, as you say, and
just to interject there, I mean, the reports coming out of Sporting Lisbon are suggesting they've had absolutely no bids whatsoever from Manchester United or Arsenal so far for Victor Gyokeres.
Yeah. Doesn't mean having that conversations though, right? Official bid versus conversations are two different things. Like Tottenham, for example, have to disclose any bid that comes in for the club, but we haven't heard any of those. But there's probably been some conversations. Next, sort of, I think the penultimate story here for the day is Rafael Leao. 100 million euros is the asking price for him. Any takers in world football? 100 million pound for Rafael Leao, 100 million euros rather. I mean, it's punchy for a player that I don't know. Isn't he just one of these? Another one that's like when he wants to, he's a game changer. When he can't be bothered, he's another one that just
too busy making
to this league. I don't know. What are we doing here?
Too busy making rap records, Sean. I mean, that's just what I'm saying. He's a bit, he's making music. Stick to what you know. It's like Nico Williams. Nico Williams on his day can stretch any defence, but for that sort of money that they're asking for him, you've got to be consistent. And I haven't seen enough of Leao. I mean, AC Milan haven't exactly had the most incredible season, have they? So I can't see where they're getting these numbers from. The interesting thing is, with Europe being absolutely skint, when someone from the Premier League goes to Europe, it's like we've got a couple of bottle tops. We've got a couple of bottle tops opening the pockets. We haven't got much in here. We can pay on the never, never. But as soon as you go there and try to tap up any talent, even an average talent, it's telephone numbers. And, we have to fight back. The Premier League has been the sugar daddy of the rest of Europe at the moment. We're number 2 to the Saudis. And, we're not extracting great value when you're spending, in my opinion, when you're spending £60 million on a player. On average, it's very, very difficult to see you getting your money back on certain players. It really, very difficult.
Everyone just seems to be 50, 60 million now, don't they? That sort of is the sort of benchmark for I mean, we've got a few at Spurs, right? That are not, elite players that have cost, Richarlison being the prime example of that sort of 60 million mark.
Well, look at Grealish. Well, I mean,
I think.
Look at Grealish, £100 million. He's been left at home. He played 7 games for Manchester City this season, 7. Now, where does that leave him? He's on massive wages.
He'll go to Newcastle.
£1 billion. He's obviously now surplus to requirements. Who's going to take the risk other than a loan?
I think Newcastle will.
Huh?
I think Newcastle will go. I think Newcastle are looking for a bit of a name to come in to keep their fact, because I think their fans are starting to get a little bit itchy feet. Why is it that we've got the wealthiest owners in the world, but we're the only fucking monsters that don't seem to do the shenanigans of moving their left arm to their right and loaning it back and all that stuff? It's madness for me. And I kind of want to get your take on that. And I'll let you round off on that one, mate, about Newcastle and Jack Grealish, and then I'll also give you this article first, and then Johnny, you can round us off, mate. We were all concerned about Leroy Sané, right, coming to Tottenham. Ended up not coming to Tottenham. He apparently had no interest in coming to Tottenham. All that bollocks that we went through. I mean, what was it? It was supposed to be, the wages are prohibitive. Tottenham are never going to pay 300 grand a week. Geezer's getting paid 9 million euros a year, which is 180,000 euros, which is 150 grand. That is within Tottenham's wheelhouse for a free transfer.
Net though, Sean, apparently.
Oh, is it net? Is it? Does it say net there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
But at the same time, I think Turkey have got this special regime for footballers whereby they have to pay less tax. So,
really?
You don't. Yeah, I don't. Hence why Galatasaray have been able to attract players like Osimhen and Sane, because they can pay them decent wages net as a result. And so, yeah, I think. You don't double that number like you would if it was in the
that makes sense. It's just quietly Turkey are just quietly going about, or at least a couple of teams out there, Fenerbahce, Galatasaray, and maybe basically those two. They're quietly going about, Johnny, aren't they, mate? Like just putting together for the last couple of years. They're spending a lot of money, getting some big names, maybe on the decline. Are they like the new Saudi, like a baby, like Saudi light?
No. Listen. Turkey have got a terrible reputation of paying their players their actual wages, Sean. What they do is they extend the transfer window for a week after everybody else. Yeah. And the reason why they do that is because all the players that they can't offload, right, and teams can't offload, they take out to Turkey and they pay them a fraction. They do a deal and they pay the wages. That's how they get by. It's like, you see how many deals are done to Turkey in the last week of the...
Yeah, I know, but this one's done early, right? So this one's
done early, but on the whole, that's how Turkey have been operating, for the last 3 or 4 years. And they have a reputation, as I say, late payments. And this is the way they circumvent it, because they don't have that amount of money that they have in other leagues. The French league, one that's suffering at the moment. The French league have got no TV rights as such, and the income is extremely low. I'd like to see the income in Turkey compared to France. Actually, it'd be quite interesting to see.
I think one of the Turkey stadiums has got the second or third highest ever naming rights deal. I think they've got a Turkish telecom company that I'm not sure if it's Galatasaray or Fenerbahce. I think it might be Fenerbahce that have got it's 18, 19 million euros a year. I think it's the second or third biggest in Europe.
Sean, investigation.
What's that, mate?
I said investigation. It's probably a 3 million a year deal.
Everybody in the stadium, everyone that's a member gets a free phone number for a free SIM card or whatever.
There'll be some deal. Anything that's well over the odds. I mean, I think everyone when they sold the naming rights to the Hard Rock Stadium in America and a couple of the others, they thought that model would easily translate across the pond. It hasn't, and the market for that isn't big at the moment. And I'm sure it will come back, but at the moment, not. Unless we get someone, like a Spurs, for example, like the Qataris, someone like a QIA, who have got 101 different companies within their umbrella, and so you could have them buying it, and one of these subsidiary airlines or insurance companies sponsoring all manner of things at the club. So I think you'll find that. Maybe at Chelsea or maybe at Newcastle coming very soon, because I'm sure that they will try.
Riyadh Air is going to be the Riyadh Air Arena or the Riyadh Arena, if you know what I mean. If you want to rename it,
Yes.
It's been surprising with Newcastle, though, Sean. To the point you were making earlier about Newcastle. I mean, they haven't actually gone mad, have they?
They've done nothing.
They've really stuck to. Hence why they haven't spent a lot. They've really stuck to the rules on PSR, etc. And they haven't done any of this sponsorship stuff. They haven't done any other sort of accounting shenanigans to get around it. I wonder whether it's because they're so conscious of sports washing,
100%,
and they want to do it really by the letter of the law,
until it becomes completely obvious that there's. I mean, that's why. I said that. I think I said this yesterday or 2 days ago. The Premier League, as far as I'm aware, again, I just read the story. The Premier League owners got together for their annual review, and they the idea of discussing and putting it to a vote around changing the rules on the hotel type, third tier properties and all those things. It wasn't even floated because there was absolutely no appetite amongst the owners to be able to get to the 14 votes to be able to tighten that loophole, close that loophole. And so, if these things don't even get to votes anymore, then you haven't even got to worry about 7 dissidents and seven members joining the cabal. If it doesn't even get to the vote because people just go, no, we're not interested in that, then by proxy of that, you're essentially saying that there's no more tightening. And I think that what will happen is Newcastle United for now are keeping it keeping their powder dry and keeping their nose clean, and they're basically just sort of staying out of trouble. But as soon as it becomes entirely clear that that they can get away with it without being thrown under the bus because everyone else is up to it, then you'll see them. They'll see them operate. I mean, it's a matter of time, surely. That before they start.
He's still paying off Amanda Staveley, Sean. Kicked her out.
Guys, we're going to leave it there. Connor, I want to say a massive thank you to you, mate. You're the first guest on the Football Inc., mate. You came on to deliver some truth bombs and some knowledge. Really appreciate you clarifying the Man United thing. Guys, if you are in the chat, please smash the like button, hit the subscribe. Can you get over to Leavingnomics1882 on Twitter, where Connor does all of his football, his finance bits and pieces. And look, really good getting to know you, mate. And I'll get you on the Spurs Talk Show next week for a proper chinwag about Tottenham stuff with Jonny. And get over to Talking Tottenham 1882 on Instagram and Twitter, JohnnyH3232 as well. And you can find me over on the Spurs Talk Show. But smash the like button, please, guys, and make sure you go and subscribe to the guys.
Yeah, hit the subscribe button. It's pinned. Is it pinned down there, Sean? We're trying to build the channel up, guys. So everything you do there is much appreciated. We'll try and bring you lots of different football content. Not all Spurs, I can promise you. Not all Spurs.
Tomorrow we'll be back to transfer news, views, and clues. We'll see you tomorrow. Cheers, guys. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you.